So thank you very much for everyone who's joining us, the attendees. Thank you very much for the panelists. We've got a really good, I'm very pleased with the lineup today. So first and foremost, I'm going to try and learn how to speak today if possible. I'm doing my best here, so for a Monday. So we've got Suzanne Penny. Lovely to see you, Suzanne.
Hey, morning.
Transition coach and outplacement consultant. We have Sara Hockenhull. Have I put your name right, Sara?
Oh, Sara, yes, hello there.
Sara Hockenhull, is that right?
Yes, that's right, Sara, yeah.
So Sara is a career and self-employment coach for employer branding made easy. Our good friend Nick Elston. Hello, Nick, great to see you again. Nick is an inspiration on the lived experience of mental health, and he's a speaking coach as well. And Alex Currie down there on my bottom right, but I don't know how he's looking for you, but thank you for joining us, Alex. Alex is the VP of People and Talent at Go Compare. But more interestingly, he's a Lego serious play facilitator. So
exactly, get down to the nuts and bolts of this. That was the bit that jumped out. That was really the bit that jumped out.
Yeah. When I did, we did a little rehearsal, and when I did say that Alex is a Lego serious play facilitator, Nick went, "Oh yeah, I know about that, I heard about that." So yeah, tell us about that later. Maybe we'll get through what we need to, and then we go on to next. And also, Paul has joined us last minute. Thank you very much for that, Paul. Paul is a finance manager, and he's in the job market right now. So he's facing. So the reason we brought Paul in is because he's facing some of the real challenges that I can imagine a lot of the audience are facing right now. And I understand you've created some real positive routines and could offer some support and tips on that. So brilliant. So guys, I know some of you have emailed me questions, which is brilliant. I will run through those a bit later on when we get into the flow. Anyone else, feel free to pop questions in the chat box, which hopefully you can all see, which is on my right. Hopefully it's on your right as well. Also, I'm going to run a poll as well when we get going too. So if you all vote on that, that'd be really good, because it's useful for our webinars going forward, and so we can offer you support too. So so just to kind of kick things off. So Suzanne, if we start with you, if that's okay. So you've helped people, well, thousands of people transition into new careers. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and your background?
Yeah, sure. So 20 years ago, I decided I wanted to help people find jobs. I got into the recruitment sector. I've had a role in the recruitment industry for, I don't know, 15 years as a recruiter and training manager. And then when I got made redundant myself in the recession, this was back in 2008, I saw an advert wanting somebody to support people with redundancy. And that kind of grew and grew. And I've been working with some market leading outplacement companies, which is wonderful. But a lot of people don't get outplacement. So I've been kind of making some more noise and been doing more to support people also that don't get outplacement. And outplacement, of course, is career transition redundancy support. So I feel very privileged that I've worked with C-level executives right the way through to all levels of staff, supporting them with one-to-one coaching and group training webinars. So yeah, so I've seen the whole emotions that go through it, as well as been through them myself.
So you've got the real life experience, so to speak, and you can offer some real support to some of the issues that the job seekers are experiencing right now, which is Sara, so you're a career coach.
Yes,
to help people transition into self-employment, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, a bit like Suzanne, it all started about 20 years ago. And yeah, on a couple of occasions, similarly, my job role was made redundant. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, you know, similarly working for outplacement organisations for a long number of years. But increasingly in the last few years, the last 5 or so years, I've focused primarily on self-employed individuals or people looking to transition that way, looking to start up a new business. So yeah, on the side, as it were, a side hustle is also working with my partner now when he's become self-employed himself, working in employer branding made easy. So it's kind of the other side of the coin. It's helping companies to attract the right sort of individuals to come and work for them. So kind of helping people from both sides now.
So you've got quite a broad level of experience from the candidate and the coaching side right through to the employer side as well.
Yeah, yes, indeed.
You've also had experience in helping people transition and coaching them through the fluctuations in their career, so to speak, as well, which is going to be really
yeah, absolutely, the ups and downs for sure. Yeah, very much so.
And that is certainly what's going on one right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So Nick, you've worked with us a few times before. I'd like to say you've done a fantastic job, or you have done a
bless you,
and helped. You've done a real good, added a lot of value to a lot of our attendees on our events, and it's been fantastic. The feedback we had has been brilliant. So I was desperate to get you on stage. So I'm really pleased about that. So you've kind of helped our attendees before keep a kind of clear and focused mindset and stay positive particularly during these times. I'd imagine you've been super busy right now, but can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you work?
Yeah, great, thank you. So I am a speaker on the lived experience.
Who's got muted?
No, can you hear me okay?
Went a bit silent then.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's going to happen.
Cool. Okay, cool. So I'm a speaker on mental health, on lived experience. I share my experiences of mental illness, of mental health challenges to predominantly corporate audiences. The inspirational part comes from the fact that I bring personal development into the mental health arena, clearly defining the difference between mental illness and mental health. And actually mental health we all have, and as we all experience right now, that actually could be taking quite a bit of a body blow. I think that the biggest challenges are yet to come. I think from the conditioning nature of lockdown, where you've been told for a long time, stay home, save lives, it's really hard to come away from that, especially when it's compounded by job searching or redundancy or even furlough at that point, which is still remaining in that position of not knowing what the future lies. And all of those things affect the 3 C's, the confidence and the courage and conviction. And I think when those 3 things take a blow, it's really difficult to kind of start to get a real positive grip on the bigger picture. So for me, it's all about bringing it into the day. I think a lot of anxiety comes from regret from the past or fear of the future. Very rarely is it in the day. So all we need to do is to really start to focus on how we can be resilient to go into each and every day and focus on what we have. And I'll share some more kind of tips on that later, I guess. But that's kind of my angle, really, is kind of acknowledging the fact that at the moment, it's brutal. I think we need to acknowledge that. And I think it's really important to recognize exactly where you are. And it's not necessarily a place where you want to be. But once you've done that, you can start to then move away from that point and kind of go forward. We also need to recognize at the moment that a lot of people are acting from a position of fear. So we need to kind of match that with equal compassion. And actually, we're the last people that we kind of extend kindness to as ourselves. And I think we need to start to bring that in. We're all bigger picture players, especially in the business community. So we always start with the end of mind. So I think right now, the biggest danger is an assumption. I think it's when we start to assume an outcome to anything, good or bad. I think a lot of the danger is an assumption because the world's greatest minds don't know what's going to go on, what's going to happen, even when it's going to end or what the end looks like. So actually, who are we to take a stab at that? And for me, that's actually quite empowering, that the one thing that we have control over is choice, our thoughts and our actions every single day. And actually, if we can keep it into the day, we can manage anything that comes our way. I think it's when we get carried away with the ifs and coulds and shoulds and woulds and everything else, that's where we start to get really anxious.
There's so much uncertainty around at the moment, isn't there? And nobody really knows what the future, where the future lies. And I guess it helps you to help people to see the bigger picture and see that, the light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Nick. So Alex, thank you again for getting here nice and early, nice and prompt. We were anticipating you were going to be a bit late because your schedule, but really great to see you. So you're the VP of People and Talent at Go Compare. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you do at Go Compare?
Yeah, of course. I initially set out to become a qualified solicitor, which I did in my early career, and decided very quickly that actually people and talent was where I wanted to be. So I made the transition across. And I've been sort of working through, I'd say, the people and talent sphere for circa 15 years. And yeah, at Go Compare, I have overall responsibility for all of our people practices and then our talent acquisition and development, so learning and development and recruitment. And I oversee the departments that would be responsible for the job posting, the interviewing, our go-to-market strategy when it comes to our candidate proposition, and then once they sort of hit the ground, what we do from a skills building perspective.
Fantastic. Ooh, sorry, yeah, thank you. So it'd be really great to kind of see your perspective on an employer point of view as well, and what you're seeing in the marketplace right now. So thank you again. Paul, you've created some really positive routines right now. I understand we had a good conversation. Well, only on Saturday, wasn't it? So how are you finding things at the moment, briefly?
Well, I think there's two things going on that affect all job seekers at the moment. I think firstly is that the job market is oversupplied. Mm-hmm. And so we hear a lot about the jobs that have 500 applicants, or we hear about you apply for, for every 100 people that send in a click on apply now on a job board, maybe only one or two will hear back. So that's a sort of a known problem. And I think one thing that's another challenge for all job seekers that is perhaps a little bit more unknown is that is for us to think about how we're going about our job search. Because it's tough, it's getting tougher, but there's ways that we can do to optimize our search. Lots of different channels that you can use. And it's not just about taking your CV and applying to yet another job with exactly the same CV. So there's ways that we can maximize our chances, I guess, Tudor.
Yeah, great, and we can hear some more of your tips as we progress into the session. But thank you again, Paul, for joining us. Suzanne, with a nice tidy background, nice tidy room, looking very sharp.
At the back that doesn't get
I see we've had a few comments in the background on the tidying tips, in the chat as well, on your tidying tips as well. So maybe that's another webinar potential as well. But so what are you seeing in the job market right now? How's things from your side?
I've been speaking to lots of recruiters, and I've noticed lots of posts on LinkedIn, and I've noticed lots of posts from job seeking posts on LinkedIn. There's some definite positives, and we all know it's challenging out there. I'm not here to sell it to you. It is challenging out there, but we're definitely seeing some growth industries. So there's some obvious ones that with everything going on, healthcare is really busy, IT, digital is gone really busy. I know self-employment is picking up because there's a huge demand for web designers. Education, with people going back to school, it's construction and industrial has been busy. I've also heard from recruiters last week, perms are picking up for legal insurance, and some recruiters saying they're having record, really, really good months at the moment. So there's definitely some positives out there. In terms of contract roles always pick up when there's times of uncertainty. We saw it as a trend in 2008 in the recession, and we're seeing it as a trend now. So contract roles will always pick up in times of uncertainty. Logistics, industrial, healthcare again, legal, HR has picked up. And some hospitality is starting to pick up with temp as people are, going back to restaurants, etc. So some of those roles have. But, and interestingly, Paul, we mentioned this morning, didn't we, in our networking group, how it's easy when you think about some of these sectors for people to think, well, that's not my sectors, I'm not in that particular sector. But some of these sectors will still take on a finance manager, a HR manager, a HR consultant, a payroll person. So there's still maybe those transferable skills that you have to be able to look at transferring across into an industry. So I definitely would say to anyone out there as well, consider the contract market. Make sure on our LinkedIn that we're potentially open to contract and permanent opportunities. But that's some of the trends I'm seeing out in the market. And I just, as we're talking job market, just to mention, not yesterday, last weekend, the Sunday Times published their top 250 fast track medium private companies. So that's some real growth companies there. And again, it's just, if these are companies, 77% of those just before the COVID restrictions, the new COVID restrictions, said they were really optimistic about post-pandemic prospects. So there is some positivity, but yes, it's challenging. It is a challenging market, and as Paul said, once that role is advertised, there's more competition that you're going to be up against.
Yeah, the competition is certainly fierce, and it's looking like in towards the end of October, it's going to get potentially even more challenging, depending on the government's stance on help seekers.
But then think at the moment, so I had a look at the Recruitment and Employment Confederation report, and the top 1 and 2 ways that companies are taking on staff is word of mouth. So word of mouth is massive. The direct approach, people go in directly on a speculative approach, that's really massive as well. Yeah. And somebody mentioned, and I haven't started answering questions, but and I think the hidden jobs market is bigger than it's ever been. It's always been big. It's always been statistics of around over 70% of all the jobs are hidden. But at the moment, we think it's even more, because once the roles are advertised, lots of competition, lots of responses come in, and there's that feel that you need to get back to everybody. So definitely, if you're sending your CV only to advertise roles, word of mouth is really important, going directly is really important, and then you're ahead of the competition. So that's got to be a key one.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. That's a really good point. So and also you've supported like I say, thousands of people through the redundancy process, not just now, but throughout your career, and I won't ask how long that is, but through a lengthy, good career. And so what are you noticing about the emotions that people have go through during that redundancy process, because it is such a big change for people and such a challenge.
Yeah.
So what are you noticing, then previously pre-COVID and now during these times?
It depends on people's situations. I see people will come at this at a different angle. So some people welcome redundancy because it gives them that push to do something that they've been wanting to do. And for other people, it meant that their job that they loved and the projects that they were working with, the people that they were working with, has suddenly gone. So it can affect people in different ways. If anyone is watching that doesn't know the change curve, the Kubler-Ross change curve, I definitely recommend that you have a look at it. I don't know if you can bring it up, Tudor, if you've got it. But if not,
I'll do my
have
best.
a look at it. It shows there's a whole host of emotions that happen when change takes place. And the other thing I will just mention is that change and transition is different. So transition is our internal psychological process that we have to go through to make sense of that change. So if you're in transition, if your role's been made redundant and we are in transition, it starts with an ending and a loss and a letting go before we usually get excited about that new beginnings. So all I would say to anybody out there, if you notice that you're having days where you're on it, where you're having really good days, you're high energy, and you're feeling really good, then really plow into your job search. But also you've got to, from a resilience point of view, take care of those days where you're feeling anxious, worried, because we're all going to have good days and bad days. You can't job search 24/7. So on the days where you're struggling, and maybe you flip back, because you don't just go through this curve and stay up at the other end. People tend to tip back. And I would just say that's important to remember. Yeah, so
Oh,
what's that?
can you see the change curve? I've tried to share.
Yeah, we've got it. Yeah, perfect. We've got it up there. And it shows at the very top, William Bridges' work is very much starts with the endings, and then you get into that neutral zone before you get into new beginnings. But again, it just shows the host of emotions. And a lot of people I've supported, some days they'll say to me, I'm having a really good day, I'm on it, I've had a really good week. And then suddenly we get some rejections in and we go straight back again. And then it usually we go up and then the rejections come and we're straight back again. So I think a key message is anyone out there whose role has been made redundant, you're not starting with nothing. You're not starting from a complete clean slate. You're starting with a shed load of experience, a shed load of skills and expertise that you can take to another company. They belong to you. So it's just important to remember.
Fantastic. And that brings me nicely to Nick. So what are you kind of seeing from a mental health perspective? You know, I all these emotions going around, you know, and like Suzanne says, you know, potentially being made redundant could be a positive thing because you've got a nice package and a bit of a safety blanket, but others aren't so lucky, you know. And I'm seeing a lot of that personally here as well. But what's your kind of
So yeah, thank you, Tudor. Suzanne touched on it as well. I think I deliver content all over the world on my stuff, and we've got a real problem in the UK that we have been brought up generationally and culturally to believe that self-care is selfish. So actually we're the last people that we kind of prioritize. So that's why sometimes that we feel guilty for like Suzanne said, having that break if you're feeling worn out, if you're feeling run down, when absolutely we should take priority. So there's a lot of power in, from a personal point of view, there's a lot of power in a daily self-care routine, which actually maintains your energy. It's all about energy regulation to make sure that you can manage that throughout the day, recognizing if you're not on form, you can take that step back. But actually, when you are at those times where you feel a little bit more kind of bulletproof, you can then go forward with the right energy. So there's that element. I think from a corporate kind of business point of view, the two biggest anxiety triggers that kind of get fed back to me from corporate feedback before I work with a client is change and procrastination. But change is inevitable. So actually that's the reason why resilience is key. We cannot control the uncontrollable. The pursuit of doing so will only create extra anxiety. So we need to focus on what we can truly have any impact on, which is basically choice. But when we're struggling with low self-esteem or low self-confidence, choice is the first thing that we give away. So each and every day, that Groundhog Day mentality that we may be feeling in the chase, or even just working from home, wherever that may be, we need to kind of harness that and actually turn that to our advantage. Actually make that and actually recognize, as I said, that energy regulation and recovery kind of element. I think from the only work I do in kind of outplacement kind of scenarios is with my speaking coaching stuff. So I help people kind of get interview ready, but it's a little bit different take. It's not just about presentation skills. I think there's a lot of kind of a big challenge with people kind of put all of their personal worth, their value and their accountability on the outcome of any one decision, an outcome of any one interview in this example. And for me, we need to kind of get ourselves set for success in any meeting or interview we go into, but in some ways we have to prepare to fail. We cannot put everything into that one, otherwise we're going to be riding that roller coaster all the time. So for me, it's about consistency, is actually making sure that even multiple decisions that go against you, they still don't define you as an individual. So again, it's even on a speaking kind of level, it comes into resilience. I'll share a bit on the speaking stuff a bit later on. But there's an amazing guy called Dave Peltzer, wrote a series of books called A Child Called It. It's quite harrowing kind of books, but they had kind of rules for life in there. And one of them was really powerful for me, was live in day type compartments. Anxiety to me was regret from the past or fear of the future, as I said just now. And actually that means today we can put everything we've got into that day. And anxiety only really is created in the thought of doing something. When we're actually doing that thing, usually we're okay. Usually we can manage that. I mean, public speaking is a great example of that. If Harvard considered public speaking a greater fear than death, that we fear ridicule more than we do dying, and that's a condition that we're fighting against. So actually the anxiety comes from the assumed outcome to any given situation. It could be a conversation that went wrong or an event that went wrong. We kind of build this narrative around it. So if we can stick to the process and try to kind of eliminate the emotion from the process, we can then start to really focus on what we should be doing to kind of get that momentum built up. Does that make sense?
Can I just add a little thing onto that? And hardly anybody, not in a pandemic, before this whole pandemic, hardly anyone gets the first job they ever go for. So you've got to almost, with your mindset, be ready for those rejections, because they're going to happen. Rejections are all part of the job search process. And in a global pandemic, it's so easy when you're getting the rejections to take it personally. But just really prepare your mind that you're going to get lots of no's, probably a bit like online dating where you get no, but then you get a yes. So keep going, because it's that one job that you're after, but just be ready for those no's and the rejections, because they're going to be part of it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's the problem, is when we start to put our whole worth in the outcome of any one decision. Actually, if I'm honest, I never intended to do this as a job, for example, and along the way, I mean, that's another element very quickly, that I worked in corporate sales all of my life. All of my professional career was in corporate sales. So when I looked for another job, even if it was off my own back, I only ever looked at the same industry and the same roles. I never actually once looked out of that scope. It was only through these kind of bad or negative events that happened did it make me look sideways and make me look differently. And there's also recognizing that at certain times in your life, maybe you're somewhere that you don't want to be, but it's got to be done to keep just things going along. And I've shared this before with you guys from the sales round table, but for the first year of self-employment, for example, I was working 36 hours a week for Tesco delivering groceries. It's not something I wanted to do, but it did the job. I learned so much from that. And it's recognizing that sometimes we need to start to break our conditioning in that sense as well. Kind of, as my gran used to say, if you always did, you always done, you'll always get what you always got. Sometimes we've got to shake it up a little bit. So these kind of really obviously unwanted and volatile times could actually be the catalyst for some real positive change if pointed and harnessed in the right direction.
Yeah, and something really positive came out of that, but we'll go into that a bit later on, because I want you to tell that story before we go. But
okay.
We just go to Alex, because I'm just trying to. You all know I'm no good at multitasking, but looking through these, looking through the chat. I think it'd be interesting to hear Alex's point of view from a recruiter perspective, because you're in a very senior position within Go Compare and managing the recruitment team. But what kind of advice would you give to job seekers? Because I would imagine, I could be wrong, but I'd imagine you're seeing quite an influx of applications coming through, probably more than normal. What advice would you specifically give?
Yeah, our applications are actually up by 400%. So we're seeing a real sort of increase in the number of applications that we're getting for each role. In terms of advice I'd give to job seekers, number one is always make sure your CV is going to land on the desk of somebody that's probably going to have about 15 to 30 seconds to quickly assess whether or not you have the skills or the experience that are required. So make sure that CV that you've got adequately demonstrates the value that you can bring to the role in the organization. And don't be afraid to, if it's a job that you really want, tailor it to the company that you're going to be working for, or applying for, sorry. One of the best job adverts that I ever saw was for a young software engineer, and it sticks out in my mind. And it was probably about 8 to 10 years ago. And he had designed a website that was a game. And he sent it through, and we played the game. And as we went through the game, we learned lots about that individual. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's got either the skills or the ability or the time to be able to make a game per employer. But there are things that you can do. So, looking at the layout of your CV, ensuring that, it's spell checked, that it's got all of your history, and that you are open and honest about the skills that you feel that you could bring. That would probably be my number one for job seekers.
Yeah. I actually, my applications have gone significantly increased as well, and sometimes it's the fundamentals, like you say. You still get CVs that haven't been spell checked. Sometimes they kind of go, in in circles, you know, but like you say, particularly right now, it's super important that you make it super clear, very clear, you know, this is what I do, this is what I've done, because in everyone's job they do a million things, and it's trying to cram that onto a CV. It's so hard, isn't it? Because you're like, oh, and I do this and I do that, and then before you know it, you've got an essay just on one job. So if you tailor it to one particular job, the job that you want, and just bullet point the key things, I think, and make it a lot more targeted. But sometimes it is the fundamentals, like spell checking as well, that does, unfortunately, in a really competitive marketplace, even if spelling isn't important, in this competitive marketplace is super important. You just get these details right.
It's essential at the moment. A strong CV is essential. It's got to be applicant tracking system compatible. It's got to be targeted to what you want to do. It's got to have the bits taken out that you're no longer relevant. The whole keyword is relevant. And I remember coaching a lady who said to me, I'll do anything. And I looked at her CV and it was sales, customer service, account management, admin, at reception, it was everything. And she'd sent it to hundreds of companies, got nothing back whatsoever. And then when we really drilled into what she wanted to do, it was sales and account management. We made a really strong CV for that. And that's when she sent it out to 20 companies. She got 3 or 4 interviews back, and she had multiple job offers. So it makes such a difference, tailoring your CV, targeting. If you put it onto a CV job board, I always say to my networking group, refresh it regularly, otherwise it gets lost in the pile if you put it on a job board. When I say refresh it, change a word, resave it. But having a strong CV, and not just your CV, because your CV often stays on your desktop unless you're sending it out to companies directly. Strong LinkedIn profile, targeted LinkedIn profile, optimized, that recruiters can find you. And Paul, you and I have seen a lot more. Some people are really embracing LinkedIn, don't you think, Paul, in the job search community out there?
Yeah, and I think it's important as well, because on LinkedIn, you talk about sending CVs off. It's very important to learn from the last thing that you did. And LinkedIn is a very sharing community, and the CV that you had last week is probably not going to be as good as the CV that you've got this week, because you've learned from somebody in your network, and typically that network or often that network is on LinkedIn. So it's very important to have these different channels through which you're pursuing your next job.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just give a really quick tip, because somebody asked a question and it was about it's a difficulty, and we need to recognize that it can be difficult to transfer to another sector. So if you've noticed that you're in a sector that's struggling at the moment, and I've got people reaching out on LinkedIn, I need to transfer to a different sector. Be savvy with your CV. There's a skills-based CV that you can use where you highlight your transferable skills to move sector. Now, with more competition, it may be that they are looking for sector experience. But at the same time, like I said, if they're looking for a great HR person, a great learning and development person, a great payroll person, it might not matter. And I do say that from experience, and I will very briefly say this because I don't want this session to be about me, but back in December, I applied to a role in the power industry. I've never worked in the energy sector in my whole life. And I was taken on for that fixed term contract, which I'm on at the moment, because of my learning and development expertise. And if I'm up against other people in the energy sector, they took me on because they wanted a people development person, and they took me for that role. So I saw how I did it. I've managed to do it and break into a different sector, but with more competition. Make sure that your CV is very strong around your achievements and your transferable skills.
So a good question for Sara. So
Yes.
8 years ago, I started my business. We just had twins. We had 4 kids under the age of 4 years old.
Ooh.
Nobody
That's
a business, it's a good idea. No one.
Right.
But I for some reason I just had this idea and I just wanted to run with it. In hindsight, it was a stupid idea, to be honest. But so from your perspective, because you do coach people into self-employment. I mean, is it it's a bonkers world right now? Is it a good idea, or what's your stance on it?
You know, honestly, it is. It's a really great time. I mean, ultimately, you know, the working world is just moving increasingly towards people being entrepreneurial anyway. You know, there's just an increasing trend for people taking up portfolio working, for instance, you know, doing a number of different things. So having a number of different types of work, and a bit like Nick was mentioning, which was really useful. You know, he had his time at Tesco's whilst he was setting up his you know, own business. Great way to go, because then you've got the certainty of that ongoing income, but you're building up things on the side too. So yeah, I think it's a great time for it. And ultimately, you know, with building a business, in terms of, you know, some success stories and people that I've heard of just very recently, even, like I went to the hairdressers, hurrah, at last, after lockdown, what a relief. And you know, this hairdresser was saying that her partner, you know, he'd been made redundant from his role, had some skills in like car body work and you know, cleaning interiors, that sort of thing. That was something he loved to do, and literally just through a business card and a phone number, that was all, you know, he'd needed to have, through word of mouth, just, you know, this message spread. You know, and because people have been at home, they've got more time, they're thinking about things that they're not typically able to do, you know, and have time to focus on. So for his type of work, you know, something like car body work, perhaps, you know, people wouldn't normally think of that. Or work around the home. Funnily enough, chap who's having to do some painting for us, you know, he was saying, I'm turning work away. I'm literally turning work away. I cannot do the work that I'm being asked to do. People with, you know, DIY skills. There's lots of areas, you know, whether it's making vegan cakes or whatever. People are starting up their small businesses in a way which means that they can just dip the toe in the water and see if it works for them. And it might be a good time to try it. I think, you know, time of coronavirus means that people would look favourably on people doing something a bit different during this time, even if it doesn't work out in future. It might be just a temporary thing. But yeah,
it's good to have, like, as you call it, a side hustle as well, you know, like your branding thing. But one of my friends, he had the best job in the world. He was a cameraman for Sky, and he used to fly around filming all the Sky sports, so particularly golf. And so one minute he's in Dubai, next minute he's in Kuala Lumpur, he's absolutely all at America, all over the place. But that just went to a standstill during COVID. It completely the rug, and he was self-employed. So he's actually, and he you know, he's had a great career and has done really well, but he's kind of swallowed his pride, and he's actually picking and packing in the Amazon factory right now until either get back up to normal or he's decided an alternative, you know. And I think I've seen this before. You know, people get a lovely, well, they get maybe redundant, they get a huge redundancy package, and they think, well, I'm okay for a bit, you know. Well, they decide to start a business, well, but that money's just going, it's going and going and going, and not everyone has that luxury. And then give it a year, it's all gone, and then they have to go in the Amazon factory, you know. So it's kind of worth being a bit proactive, I think, and particularly if you go into self-employment, you do need that safety blanket, don't you? Even if it doesn't fully cover the bills, or even if it just helps you break even, you know, you need something, don't you?
Depends on people's circumstances, because we've got people, again, saying at the moment, I'm just waiting for the right role. I don't want to rush, I want to wait. And if they're in a position to wait, that's no problem. But if we've got people on here that are thinking, I need to get something quickly, and I know I've always said as a career coach, a career is a marathon and not a sprint, but we might have got people that need to sprint into something pretty quick. And don't worry if you need to do something different ad hoc. I don't think any employer can frown on it this year. But also, like Sara said, being self-employed you don't have to have a website, you don't have to have a big setup. You can start as a sole trader. If you know some people in your network that will use your skills and expertise for a set amount of days or weeks or months, go for it. But don't be worried about doing something ad hoc this year if you feel that you need to.
And I think if it's okay to say, just the idea of people taking their redundancy money and ploughing large amounts into a kind of capital, you know, money intensive business is you know, not what I'm suggesting. That's something well, if that's been your plan for a long time, that's something quite different. But this is more about setting something up, you know, a little bit like restaurants these days. They quite often have a pop-up restaurant to begin with. So they, in other words, just try the concept and see if that works before ploughing lots and lots of money into, you know, having premises, etc. And whatever business you take up, I would suggest you take that sort of idea, you know, where you just start it small. If you want to make vegan cakes, make a batch and, you know, see if your friends like them. Do you know what I mean? Just, and then scale up would
It's
be
really
more
interesting
ideal.
actually to see some of the little businesses, businesses that are popping up, things like, you know, cake making or a bit of DIY here and there. It's really interesting, and maybe it's a time to kind of, you know, bring out some of your hobbies. What are you interested in? What do you enjoy doing? What makes you smile? You know. I've got a question here from our good friend David. David Parker, thank you for joining. Thanks for pinging your question over to me. And I think Paul's a good one to answer this. So David was interested to hear the panel's thoughts on keeping a daily routine. So, you know, how do you create a positive, and I think Nick can help with this as well, but I know, Paul, you've created a really good routine, and you were talking about things that you've picked up along the way to help you stay positive. Can you share a bit more of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple, really, but I think it is good to have a routine and to effectively treat your job search as a job in itself. You know, for example, my wife's she's a teacher, and the alarm will go off at 6 o'clock, and I'll get up with her, and I'll take him for a walk, and then I'll set down here at in my home office and start my search, and I treat it like a working day. And I think the importance of that is that it gives you purpose. I think if you just treat it each day sort of, you know, ad hoc, you wouldn't really have that purpose, and you'd feel as though, or I would feel as though I was drifting somewhat. So it's helpful to me to have that structure. Now, you might not be an early bird like me. You might rather do that at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and it's whatever works for you, and it's whenever you're most productive. But I think it is good to build some routines as though you were at work.
Yeah, that's interesting. What about you, Nick? What kind of things can we?
Well, to be fair, Paul's hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, that's the main thing, is trying to avoid that lethargy and frustration that it can create if you don't do those things. Kind of as if you were going into the day, going out to an office, going out to an employer, and actually having that same positive intention. So, and you mentioned kind of getting up at that time. Sleep regulation's been really important, I think, during lockdown anyway. So not necessarily what time you go to bed and what time you get up, but keeping the same times all the time, 7 days a week. So I do 11 o'clock, I go to sleep, 6 o'clock I get up. Because especially with anxiety thrown into them, it's a bit of a pain on. I was going to swear, it's just a bit of a pain on the Sunday morning, but there we go. It's worth the effort. It regulates your sleep, so therefore you've got the energy to distribute evenly throughout the day. So if you can start to maintain that through exercising, but sleep is a real challenge when things like anxiety creeps in. There's several hacks that you could use for that. One of the most powerful ones, I think, is the power of journaling, actually on paper. So if you're lying there with stuff going around your head, just get up, write it down on paper, go back to lie down, and your brain thinks it's done. It's not telling you at 2 minutes past 4 in the morning to go and do it now. It's saying, don't forget to do that tomorrow. So actually, if you can get out of your head and onto paper, you can then, your brain switches off. Lots of different things like that, but sleep is massive. And actually is probably the first thing to go when we start to really struggle with life. So exactly what Paul said, but incorporate and try sleep regulation. That's been really important for lockdown generally.
There's so many good things on Netflix at the moment as well, isn't there?
Julie, one thing sorry, Nick, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think after you, Paul.
Right. One of the things that's really helpful, has really helped me and helps a lot of people, is to use this gap time wisely as well. You know, so when you're planning your day, it's not just, I'm just going to work on job applications or pursue interviews or even attend webinars such as this. One of the things that a lot of people find when they're job seeking is they've just lost their job and they feel useless. And that's really powerful in a negative way. And I think it's important to try and push back against that. And one of the ways that you could do that, very simplistically, one of the ways that you can do it is by engaging in LinkedIn, helping others with their job search. And by doing that, and by paying into that LinkedIn ecosystem, then you're giving some value back, which in turn makes you feel better. But thinking, even beyond that, a lot of my connections do some brilliant voluntary work. I've got connections who are on crisis lines and Samaritans, and they volunteer at National Trust. And I do some back office work at my wife's school. Just on a voluntary basis, spreadsheets, it makes me feel valued, and it helps somebody else. And I think it's important, to do that. A, because you got the time, but B, it helps your own well-being, I think.
Yeah. Great point. And remember, everybody out there, this is a temporary situation that you're in, and the worst thing people say with redundancy is you're on that journey, you're heading somewhere, but you don't know when you're going to get there. But when you get there, you'll look back and think, I wish I'd learned, I don't know, a skill or something I wanted to have the time to do. So if there's something that you want to learn, the voluntary work, as you said, Paul, those are really important things to do. But also if there's that worrying of not knowing when, and it may be that you need to look at your finances at the moment to curb those, whatever may be, but just you will land a new role. Every single person I've supported has landed new roles, and they've looked back and always said, I really wish I'd done my French course or whatever it was I wanted to do, and I didn't make time. So it could be another thing that you could weave into your job search plan over the week, and having time to do some learning in there.
So if I just build on that with just one more thing as well, is that as far as resilience goes, don't just measure progress as to whether I've got a job or not. There are lots of different ways to measure progress. People have second interviews and they don't get there, and they fail, and they think that that's failure and not progress, but they didn't have a second interview until this week. That's really good progress. And a really good routine, come back to routines, Tudor, is at the end of a week, write down what you've done. And you might not have reached that pot of gold of the job, but when you write it down, I had a second interview, I attended a webinar on Monday lunchtime, and I learned a lot. Then it's all these incremental gains will eventually get you over the line.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to ask this. Thank you, Paul. That's really, really useful. I was going to ask this to Alex, actually, because I had a question from Graham Goodwin. Thank you, Graham, for pinging it over to me directly this morning. So Graham's asking, how should I measure my progress on the job search? So he's not talking about, get, like Paul says, getting a job. Should he measure his progress on, the number of applications made, interviews offered, contacts added, increases? Now, what's your thoughts on that, Alex?
I think, I think my first sort of go to with that question is don't be too het up around what your success metrics are. You'll put an awful lot of pressure on yourself as you go through that. Now, I think success metrics be, setting yourself some goals or some targets. You're going to do an hour of job search, or you're going to do an hour of LinkedIn where you're going to network with a number of people. That's probably more healthy for an individual to focus on, rather than I've got 4 interviews, because a lot of that stuff is outside of their control. And I think if somebody like Graham were to focus on that, it could quickly become quite a negative experience. So I think focus on things that you have control on, focus on things that you can directly influence, and that should see you through to a positive outcome.
I did have another question in the chat, and I can't quite find it now, because there's quite a bit going on in the chat, which is brilliant. And one of the challenge seems to be, people putting lots of applications through, but not hearing anything. They're not getting a no, they're not getting a maybe, they're not getting a yes, they're hearing nothing. And what's your kind of thoughts on that? Because I from my perspective, it is very difficult to let every single applicant because I may get an application for a VP of sales from a welder, you know, and that's tricky to kind of explain, you know, to give these type of people, because some people blanket apply, don't they, you know?
They do. I think I'm very regimented on my thinking on this, and if you apply for a job, everyone should get a response. Now that might not be a tailored response, but at least you hear that actually you haven't been successful. It's the click of a button. If you're going to review a CV and think, is that successful? Yes or no, am I going to take it through? You click a button, depending on your applicant tracking system, and that can fire an automated response. I think sometimes just being hung in the unknown, you know, have they reviewed my CV? Have they decided whether or not they're going to take me forward? Now, I appreciate I work for a larger company, so that's an easy thing to do, and it's an easy requisite to put down that will reply to everybody. For smaller companies, I can appreciate with the volumes coming in, that can be slightly more difficult.
Yeah. And I guess would you recommend, you know, if people are hearing nothing, maybe would part of their routine, you know, for example, 9 till 11 be applications, 11 till 12 on the phone following up, or LinkedIn following up? Would you recommend that as part of the process as well? Because things do get strangely lost in the abyss, you know?
Yeah, and I'm sure some of the other panelists will have a view. I think a lot of this will come down to self-awareness. You know, there's a point at which you know whether or not you're in the ballpark for a role. Now, if you are a welder applying for a VP of sales, you know, it's probably not worth following up on that job application. But if you're in the ballpark, there's nothing wrong with, you know, sending a gentle "Hi, how are you?" I wouldn't do that every Monday to the same recruiter, because that could, you know, become quite annoying. But reaching out and saying, "Hi, I dropped an email, but I'd be, you know, appreciate whether or not you could give me an update." I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think actually it's quite, it shows some good tenacity to be proactive on some of these roles.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree. And if people have, I like it when people have like an almost an elevator pitch on themselves. You know, "Hi, I'm Tudor. I specialize in this, this, and this. I put an application through to you yesterday. Just wanted to follow up, make sure you got it correctly." Rather than, you know, a huge CV, blurting out your CV verbally, you know, a nice short punchy follow-up. Just wanted to make sure you got it correctly. And it shows that you're keen, which is really important. You're tenacious, you're driven, you know, you've got the right attitude, and your communication skills are there as well, you know.
Really nice tip that Andy's just come in. Did you see it?
Say that again, sorry?
Did you see the tip that Andy's put in the chat function? Really nice one. If you focus on the bits in your control, Andy has put in there, schedule your follow-up calls for feedback. When you've got the interviewer on the phone, if they're scheduling your interview, don't just schedule the interview, say what time are we going to do the interview feedback, try and schedule that. And also 4 or 5 people in the last few weeks that have landed new roles in my network, they had an automated no, and they went directly to the hiring manager because they thought that was a really good role for them. So they got an automated no, went direct to the hiring manager, and that's how they've landed those roles. So that's the bit in your control.
I actually made a placement this morning, and the lady called me early last week. She didn't send a CV, she phoned me first. I know this doesn't work for all companies and all recruitment companies or processes. She phoned me up, she told me the situation, she gave me a good kind of headlines on her, what she's looking for. She was very specific. She'd looked on my website, she'd done her research. She's like, "I noticed you specialize in this, this, and this. Wondered if we could have a bit more of a conversation and see if you can help me." And super quick, I managed to get her an interview and then a second interview, and then she got offered the role at 9:30 this morning. So I think that does help, you know. But in that process, she probably made 100 phone calls that day to other people, you know.
Yeah.
So we've got a poll, if I can just find it here. So if everyone, I think, we've done quite well on the polls actually. Thank you everyone for voting. We've got 82% voted. So if you haven't, if you could ping your poll in now, and I'll end it soon. So in fact, 66%. Can you see that, panelists? I'm not quite sure if you can see the poll results.
We can see the question.
No, see the questions, not the results.
Okay, fine. So 66% of people on this webinar right now are saying the biggest challenge they face is getting a positive response back on their applications. So I would imagine, you know, the things that Alex and Suzanne have been talking about, you know, how can we overcome that? Maybe tailoring their applications or being a bit more tenacious in the follow-ups. I'm not quite sure, but maybe that's another session we could do on that. The second one, getting an interview after speaking with a hirer. 22% are saying that. 19% getting past the first interview, and then 9% getting a job offer after the interview process. So it seems like the biggest challenge is the front end, isn't it? You know, getting a response back. I'm going to post this now. We've got 91 now. Another couple of minutes if anyone wants to put a poll in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No, I'm going to end it now. Here we go. So everyone should be able to see this now.
Yep, we can see it.
See that? Yeah.
Yep.
So getting a positive response back from the applications, it seems to be the biggest challenge. So I guess, you know, the things that you guys have been saying, you know, tailoring your CV, making sure it's, you know, super clear, and the devil is in the detail as well, you know.
And those top 2 ways that companies are hiring, remember, going directly to them when they're not even advertising, and word of mouth. So networking, making sure that networking is part of your job search, and not just email networking. Trying in your strategy for the week or in the fortnight have at least 5 physical Zoom coffees, or Zoom offies, are they calling them now, with people that could potentially be able to open some doors for you. Maybe they work in companies of interest. Maybe they are fellow finance professionals, learning and development professionals, etc. But having networking as your part of your job search strategy, and not being afraid of reaching out to hiring managers, whether they're hiring or not, but expanding your network. Really important.
And on that note,
go Sarah.
Thanks, Paul. I was just going to say, I think also for people to focus on companies where they're not household names, you know, they're not those kind of major FTSE 100, etc. kind of companies. There seems to be quite a kind of temptation for people to just go for the big names that they're most familiar with. But in terms of employer branding, we're often working with a lot of companies where, you know, they're not a household name, so people don't automatically know of them and know who they are, what they do. And, you know, some of those companies can be desperately crying out for people, you know, and there's a real gap there. So try to focus on some of those companies too.
Yeah. Go on, Paul, you were going to say something?
Just looking at that, that most positive response, about getting a positive response back from applications, which is at 69%. I just wanted to illustrate that with a real example. You can get a response back that's a bit generic. That says, I'm sorry, but there were other candidates. It's really busy. We wish you, you know, we had lots of applications. We wish you well. You know, is that positive? Don't underestimate the hiring manager, because I had one a couple of weeks ago where I responded in turn to that to say, thank you very much. But are there 3 things that you could tell me specifically about my application that would help me for next time? This was in a new sector for me. A day or so later, I had a phone call from the most senior person in that organization. I had 20 minutes on the telephone with her, who went through my application in detail. I hadn't even got an interview, but she went through in detail, and she also told me how I might best approach the next job that I applied for in that sector. So, you know, keep being curious and keep prodding. And you may be surprised.
Yeah, I love that. I love Rebecca's tip here as well. Highly recommend journaling. That really helps. So that's a good thing as well. Right, we are drawing to an end now. We've gone a little over, but it's gone so quickly. So much to talk about, isn't it? It makes you realise that we're just tipping a small tip of a very large iceberg. So before we sign off, can we have from everyone 2 top tips from each of you in your job search? So can we start off with, let's start off with Suzanne, shall we?
Oh, I've got loads. Start off with somebody else and I'll mop some up at the end.
Nick.
I don't know where to start.
Okay, so I think I'll go with my tips from my speaking coaching stuff I do with that placement group. So The first one would be don't be afraid to show some vulnerability in an interview, to show a little of yourself on a personal human level to get a deeper relationship with the person that you're speaking to, first and foremost. And I mention that because actually most of us are afraid of doing that, afraid of vulnerability. We try and be this rinse and repeat candidate. We want to be ourselves. The second thing is to, from a projection point of view and anxiety point of view, is to focus on your pace, your tone, and your volume. If you can go with those things at your medium range, you can actually start to expand and kind of like really amplify the message if you use those three things. Plus, when your pace is slower, you give yourself time to breathe. You give yourself time to catch up on yourself and actually have a real deeper conversation by managing those three things.
Fab, thank you, Nick. Go, Alex, 2 tips.
Mine would be an individual. Don't be afraid to show your true self. If you're hiding something and you're not being your full, your true self, that's going to sort of go through into the workplace, and then that's ultimately not going to be the job for you because you're feeling that you're hiding something. So always be an individual. And then number 2, as I said earlier, get the basics right. Do your spell check. Make sure you're formatting correctly. Stick out on paper. That's your best bet.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Paul.
Number 1, connect with others. I mean, you're doing that today because you're on this webinar, but a job search sounds a bit cheesy. Job search is a team game, really. So that's the first one. And the second thing is, in the context of resilience, is be kind to yourself. Take some time out for yourself. Take a whole day off if you want. October half term's coming up, and if you're thinking, well, I really shouldn't be going away for 2 or 3 days with the family, do it. You need to look after yourself, and you need to look after your own well-being in order to be really on it when you're searching. So be kind to yourself.
Is it okay to have a duvet day?
Yeah, as long as every day isn't a duvet day, then that's okay.
I was considering one of those today, actually, this morning. Sara, give us 2 tips.
Oh, thanks. I mean, following up with Paul's great comments about well-being, you've mentioned a number already today, but there are 5 pillars to well-being, and if you're feeling well in yourself, mentally, physically, emotionally, that's going to give you resilience. So connecting with others, we've said, being physically active, learning new skills, being mindful, just keeping in the present day, as Nick has commented already, just keep to what's happening today, and giving to others. In summary, those are the 5 together. So definitely work with those. And in terms of another tip, give me a moment.
I thought that was about 100 in one. That was
right.
in one. Yeah. I was trying to write these down. I've given up now. Ready, Suzanne?
Oh God, okay. I think I love Becky's journal it, and we talked in our networking group about up on your wall, have your achievements, memorable feedback, print off your LinkedIn testimonials, but also maybe think about companies that you're targeting. So have your clarity on what you're targeting, but have a nice confidence wall mind map, something that's a visual can be really nice to have. I love what Paul said. Statistics show that if you do job search as part of a team, you land roles 20% quicker than if you do it on your own. That's what stats show. So to me, try and join a bubble, bubble up with some others, rather than starting your week feeling like you're on your own. There are so many people out there, and you will know people in your own networks that you could bubble up with. Would be lovely. And the last one, I posted it on LinkedIn last week, and I'm going to just mention it. The little word yet when it comes to your job search. So I haven't got an interview yet. I haven't got that offer yet. It will come, and the work you put in now will absolutely, it'll get there. But get market savvy. Don't forget networking, the power of networking and going directly. That's mine.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. So many tips there. So many tips. And we could go literally for hours. And hopefully we're going to do another one of these very soon. I'm sorry for the guys. I know there have been lots of questions coming through, and I'm sorry if we haven't covered them. I like to think that we have covered them in our chat. But if not, feel free to fire over any questions to me. And I'm sure some of the panelists might be open to getting questions from you guys too, and do connect with them. Do connect with us all on LinkedIn. And we'll follow up with the people who registered on Eventbrite. We'll follow up with some tips as well to email you and a bit of info. But if there's anything you need and anything we can do to help you through the search, you know where we are, and we're here to to support you and guide you through. So thank you so much. Those tips are super useful, not just for the job search, but in general life as well, I like to think. But really good. Thank you guys for joining us, and hope to see you all again very soon.